It's me, Charlie, from Busted.
It's me, Matt, from Busted.
And it's me, the other one from Busted.
And we're all really excited about G.I. Joe 302.
One day when I came home on a burning C-130, went out to the holograph to talk to my favorite redhead. Stood there was a ninja called Snake Eyes, who was now alive. She told me they built a clone machine like the one in the film I've seen. Yeah. She said, I've been to Cobra Island. Not much has changed, but they've turned into zombies. And the great Cobra Error is pretty fucked. It's pretty fucked.
Hey, it's me, Mark, and thanks to the boys from Busted for that little introduction for today's episode. Today, we are indeed talking about G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero issue 302, which came out on the 20th of December, 2023. And talking about it with me will be my good friend. It's a Real American. We were zombie last month, weren't we? Something else. Tim Finn.
Hello, listeners, and hello, Mark. I guess this month I could be your Real American zombie
Pensioner on a scooter.
Yeah. Zombie retiree at a post-apocalyptic casino.
Exactly. So, welcome, dear listener, to Talking Joe. If this is your first time listening, you can find out all about us over at the website, which is talkingjoe.co.uk. So, quick catch up from any other business last time. I've got a retrospective error detected from issue 301, which I noticed on rereading, Tim.
Was this that Chris Mooneyham drew the inside of the cockpit controls in 301 differently than Shannon Gallant had in 300, as if Wild Bill and Duke have teleported from the inside of one C-130 to another?
It wasn't that, no, but it was that rock and roll and gung ho disappeared. They were on the island. They were part of the backup team, if you remember. And then they, met up with the rest of the gang coming out of the casino, and then they disappeared from 301. They weren't on the Whale. They weren't on the C-130. They weren't name checked by Scarlett as she did her long list of everyone on the C-130. So
wow.
Hopefully, maybe they swum.
I was just gonna say maybe this is a special missions issue number 6. Kind of scenario where there's another comic coming that's going to tell the story of how they went somewhere and they get home and they'll be upset and feel a little guilty that they had to abandon their comrades and get home safely on their own.
Indeed. So, and the other bit of, so, we don't tend to sort of touch too much on the news side of things, but in the other bit of news there was a wave of redundancies. Hasbro, and sadly one casualty of that was a friend of the show, Michael Kelly, who we've spoken to on the show before, who is sort of heads up the publishing side of Hasbro, and has obviously been leading not just this new Skybound era of introducing that and all of the things that's coming with that, but also essentially all of the previous run at IDW was over Michael's watch. So he seems very highly regarded, and I think it feels like a great shame to lose him as a steward for the G.I. Joe brand in print.
Yeah, I imagine that there is a tremendous amount of institutional memory that goes away in that case. That Michael Kelly had a few people under him, but was doing a lot. Had a small department and had been doing it for a long time, and was sort of the right person for the job. And but the comics continue, and so either someone still there is taking on new responsibilities, or perhaps for a little while the ship coasts on its own in the ocean. I don't think either of us are worried about this in terms of quality G.I. Joe stories coming from Skybound, but this is an acknowledgement that we don't wish to make, that we enjoyed having Michael Kelly on the show, and as readers of G.I. Joe and Transformers and other Hasbro-related stories, we very much appreciate the good work he did for a long time at Hasbro.
Absolutely. Okay, so we are turning our attention to G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, issue 302, and it was brought to us by these fine folks. Writer Larry Hama, artist Chris Mooneyham, colorist Francesco Segala, flatter Sabrina Del Grosso, and I'll just pause there, maybe, Tim, so that you can tell the dear listener what a flatter is, if they aren't yet aware.
Yeah, so
Is it, Tim, that there's a big pile of comics and they take up a lot of room and they get a very heavy person to stand on top of them to make more comics squish into a box?
You're close. They take an iron. Okay. They take an iron and they heat it up, and they smooth out comics that have wrinkles. Actually, that is a part of restoring a comic. If you have an old valuable comic and you have it partially restored, you can slightly restore a cover by, I think, basically ironing it. Anyway, in the old days of coloring comics, a color artist would use dyes that look like watercolor, but they're, I believe, much more concentrated, and color on a photocopy of the original art. And the photocopy would be at print size, not large like the original art. And then the color artist would code each of the colors so that the color separator would know how to break down the printer plates for what amounts and placements of yellow and blue and magenta and black for the actual printer plates. With the advent of Photoshop and digital coloring, that final step is now sort of internalized and automated, and you can basically do that with, I think, a few keystrokes in Photoshop, outputting your PDF, and the PDF file is going to, quote, talk to the printer, the actual press. So you now have more time for the color artist in Photoshop to work their wizardry with a larger palette of colors and more effects and textures and rendering, if that's the style. If you can imagine staring at your computer at a blank page with just the black line art, you might think, if only I could have a magic person or an automated function in Photoshop just put colors in all of these spaces, right? Like any gray for Batman's torso and any blue for Batman's pants and hands, gloves and boots and head and cape, and any yellow for the bat signal behind him. That would sure save me a step. And that is what a flatter does. You can almost think of it like an assistant colorist or an apprentice colorist. And this job has evolved in the last 10 or 15 years because there are color artists who need to save time. And if they can just start doing the sort of higher function and more creative decision-making of specifically what is happening with this color, with this light source, with this texture, without slogging through a page and clicking the fill button, the paint bucket, even if that's on a separate layer. So flatters get a much smaller page rate that comes out of the colorist's page rate. The colorist hires the flatter as a subcontractor. It's not the editor. And in some cases, they get credit. I think in most cases nowadays, whoever is digitally coloring has a flatter or several flatters, even if they're not credited. And I know that a friend of mine uses a flatter who's in Asia. And so my buddy, while he's sleeping, pages are getting flatted, so he wakes up. Actually, did someone say this to us when we were doing one of our interviews about a later IDW issue? This sort of rings a bell. Anyway, that's what a flatter does.
Very good. Next person on the list there, letterer Pat Brousseau, editor Alex Antony, however that's pronounced, Alex Antone or Alex Antony, want to find out about. Publication design, Gillian Crabb, creative consultant, Diana Davis, and we being me, had a big conversation with Diana all about the road to 301, which you can have a look back at in the archive. Looking at the credits page, Tim, there was something that struck me, which is a very nice little subtle touch. And you've got a good eye for these things, so you might have noticed it yourself. But on this credits page, the colour of the lettering for the credits, like the word writer, is a green. And last issue, it was orange. And what they're very subtly doing is sort of mirroring the key colour of the subsequent page, the facing page on page 1. So in issue 1, there was an orange of the background, which was sort of mirrored in that text color, and here they're sort of using green text to kind of echo the zombie skin color and the eerie green sky over the hills of Cobra Island. Just a nice attention to detail.
Yeah, it is also possible that color choice is speaking to the Virgin cover that is right next to the credits on the credits page, because the cover to 301 had such an orange-red background. The cover, not the first page, and the cover to 302, again, here see next to the credits without the logo, which I very much appreciate, has so much green on it. But in either case, this is one of those very small, subtle things. Not just that some words are one color and some words are black, but also that the color word is a different choice the next issue. That's just a small design decision, which is just one more thing that adds to one's enjoyment of this comic, where someone is making a decision. And not to give IDW a hard time, but as a comparison, there was not a similar or analogous change from issue to issue. Well, I guess the inside front cover of every IDW issue would always have one panel from the issue we were about to read above the credits as a kind of preview, and I thought that was neat. But last episode, I was talking about how much I appreciate how good Skybound books look because of their design, and this is something that comics only started, I think, doing in the 80s, like having design decisions. If you think about prestige projects like Dark Knight Returns or Ronin by Frank Miller, and you also have letterers like Ken Bruzenak working with Howard Chaykin, who were very much not just letterers but designers, becoming more important parts of the books. And you have projects like those Marvel graphic novels and those DC books I just mentioned, where like there's going to be a table of contents, there's going to be an inside front cover, or like the back cover is an opportunity not for an ad or just a barcode, but for some decision, like here's going to be a blow up of one panel in black and white, just to sort of outro you from the experience of reading this book. And whatever the decisions are, I always appreciate it when publishers have designers, credit designers, and give designers time and space to work a little magic.
Speaking of more sort of design decisions, the back cover, very similar to last issue, is just sort of a star, a logo. Not that exciting. We sort of commented last time that hopefully they might mix things up a bit and make the back cover a little bit of more of an exciting piece of real estate of the issue.
Agreed.
Let's have a look at the covers in the gallery.
Tim, what do you make of them?
Oh man, I just want to say again how excited I am that Andy Kubert is drawing G.I. Joe covers, not just because he has in the past, and this is a fun return, but because he is an excellent cover artist. And that's a specific job. There are lots of artists who are great artists who are only okay cover artists, just as there are some great cover artists who cannot possibly draw an interior because they're too slow, or maybe that's the only reason. Or they don't actually have the storytelling chops.
Or the economics of it.
Yes, because it pays better to just do a bunch of covers. Andy Kubert. Okay, so the A cover is a somber scene of Storm Shadow, Stalker, Snake Eyes, and Throwdown carrying a makeshift stretcher with a body on it, and all you can see of the body are its combat boots because there's a shroud over it. And these 4 Joes are walking out of the whale and down its front ramp. And Andy Kubert has done something totally amazing in this cover, which is make a quiet, somber scene somewhat active and dynamic because of the fierce and slightly exaggerated perspective on the guns of the whale. So the vanishing point of them it's actually in the cover. It's actually quite near Storm Shadow's shoulder, and maybe it's above it. And actually the perspective might not quite work here, right? The guns might be obeying a slightly different vanishing point than some of the other orthogonals here. But in making the whale so sort of exciting and aggressive for not moving, for being stationary, and for being stationary during such a sad scene. And what Kubert has done here is he has divided this cover with really strong diagonals. And this is not a flat cover, right? We're looking down. This is not an angle we often see in covers, all covers, G.I. Joe covers, where the camera here is at like 15 feet and we're looking down. And so the Joes, this is not like a powerful, Incredible Hulk cover where the camera is on the ground looking up at him and he's towering over us, or, Batman is swooping past us at night between buildings in Gotham City, right? This is 4 men quietly taking a step, and their bodies get smaller as they get further away from us because of how the perspective works. And you really can appreciate this on the inside front cover, where the cover is reproduced smaller without the logo. Kubert puts some airplanes in the top background, which are almost completely covered by the logo, and a lineup of Joes featuring Cutter, Helix, Wild Bill, Roadblock, Cover Girl, Molto, Shipwreck, and then there's one that I can't quite get. Who's the one all the way up at the top? Is that Duke?
There's not a lot of indicators, really. They're quite
I might guess.
plain.
I might guess Duke. And in arranging the elements this way, Kubert has put the most important thing front and center, and then this supporting thing, these other Joes who are standing and saluting respectfully in the background. But A, you still see them and you take them in. But B, the way that they're fitting into the negative space, right? The gun that divides between Shipwreck and Roadblock. And then Brad Anderson, once again, is doing this really wonderful color work where the light on the Joes and the whale is one color, and the light on the rest of the background has a lot more yellow in it, which really separates these distances, these layers, these elements. It's just very different and handsome. I think when people think of Andy Kubert, they might think of his early G.I. Joe covers, or they might think of his X-Men covers, they might think of his Batman covers. There was that Damian miniseries that he drew and also wrote. I'm thinking this cover really reminds me in a way of his covers for The Nom. There was a 5-part story that ran in the Nom called The Death of Joe Holland. And each cover, they were not similar to this in that they had less going on and a lot more negative space. But in that one or two of them are quite somber, and Kubert really pulls it off. And I'm really curious if he's working from a Larry Hama sketch or not.
Good question.
I feel like if, maybe in a few weeks, Mr. Hama will post something on Facebook and we'll know one way or the other. I do think that Kubert is compositionally a strong enough designer that he doesn't need it. But this cover does remind me of the really smart, thoughtful arrangement of characters and elements that A Real American Hero comics were getting at Marvel in the 80s, in a way that many of the IDW issues had a little less going on. And many of them were sort of flatter, like there's the one where Zorano's attacking Dr. Mindbender in a dentist's office, or the one with, the Baroness and Snake Eyes next to each other with a white background, and sort of those ones that are more like pinups.
I had a sort of a thought about these A covers and how it relates to kind of this new era as well, and that was really that I think they've got a good lead time in terms of working on these. They've been able to get in a left field artist in Chris Mooneyham, and who probably takes longer to draw and will need more time, and sort of the results of that mean a piece of art that looks differently. So I think we're getting the benefits of them having that lead time and allowing their artists to work on the book for longer than we have for a while, and then that resulting in the product that we're seeing. But another sort of outcome of that, of them being further, working away further in advance. So at the moment they, maybe they're working on 306, 307, whatever. That will mean that they actually know what's going to happen in the book ahead of time, because it's been written, at least in plot stage, the initial Marvel style first pass plot, which should then mean that the editor can reach out to the cover artist and say this is what is happening in this particular plot, or maybe Hama can do a sketch cover based on what he knows will be happening in it, so that the cover can actually tie in to the interior, and they're that much more aligned. And like from this one, we've got that great synchronicity that the cover to this very much echoes the final page of the last issue, and definitely echoes what's the themes of this story. So I think it's great that we're seeing once again on G.I. Joe the A cover reflecting what happens in the interior, and you'll be able to look at the cover and go, oh yes, that's that issue, rather than another pin-up of Baroness or whatever.
Yeah. This may also be an editorial decision. There may be someone at Skybound who, looks at the covers from the last few years and says, regardless of the schedule, I want the covers to reflect more of the contents of the issue. What I really like about this cover to 302 is that it asks a question: who died? Who died? And if you're standing at a comic book store, or maybe online clicking a JPEG to order it or something, you might be more inclined to pick it up because you want to know. Yeah. And the sort of pinup style of covers that Marvel popularized in 2000 with all of its Ultimate comics, and that have become so prominent since then at all the publishers. That's fun, that's exciting, but G.I. Joe 53 with Snake Eyes, if you do something like that every other month, or every month across 5 variants, it loses, how many more Baroness just standing there looking awesome covers do we want? I know the answer for me is 0. Everyone else is, well, how about this? 1 in another year or 2.
While we're talking about the previews component of seeing this image, in advance as a JPEG, or maybe seeing it in the stores, is that because we've seen this issue as part of the solicits a few months ago, it definitely did prompt that question: who is under that blanket? And the speculation of who it could have been. But the obvious answer was, given that in 300 Wade Collins had been shot and was under the weather, let's say, that he could possibly come a cropper of that wound, and the people holding this gurney are his ex long range recon patrol comrades of Stalker, Storm Shadow, Snake Eyes, and then also his son. So thematically it makes sense that if anyone is going to be under there, it would be him. But looking at the cover, I thought to myself, is that too obvious an answer? Because Larry Hama always likes to dip when you expect him to dive, or whatever the expression is. So I was almost to some degree surprised that the obvious answer was the one that we got.
Yeah, I noted that Dawn is not on the cover. And even though Dawn doesn't wear boots like this, I thought maybe the corpse is representative. It's not a literal character because the covers are not literal. Covers are often exaggerations of a scene within, like, oh, they're not really in their costume in this scene as they are on the cover. Or, oh, everyone's there on the cover, but in the scene, only half of them were there. Some of them are, on the other mission. I'll say one last thing about how much I appreciate these two covers so far from Andy Kubert and or the editorial direction he's getting. They are equal parts figure and vehicle focused. And, I love G.I. Joe characters. And when we talk about story, we're talking about characters doing things and wanting things. And the vehicles are, along for the ride. But I have this rule with G.I. Joe stories that I didn't realize I had until recently when the thought consciously occurred to me, which is that some G.I. Joe vehicles have to show up pretty regularly and do something. Otherwise, it's actually not a G.I. Joe story. And, like the Mike Costa Chuckles Cobra story at IDW, I'm trying to think back, I don't think there were any vehicles in that. And when there were sort of, quote, regular Cobra characters like Crimson Guardsmen and Vipers, they were drawn a little differently because, that was sort of the real world. But it's sort of a rule like in a Transformers story, someone has to transform every 22 pages. And I've read a lot of great Transformers stories where, one or two issues goes by and I don't think anyone actually transforms. And it's sort of like, like Snake Eyes as a badass on the cover to Marvel issue 53. I think you can do that occasionally. But if you don't check in with what the sort of core concept is, you might, without people realizing it, start to alienate is too strong, but alienate some of your readers, And the Wolverine is front and center on the cover to 301. And the Whale is front and center, even more so, on the cover to 302. We've never seen the Whale like this on a cover, And looking ahead, the next two just character. And I love them all. I'm just so excited about Andy Kubert as cover artist. His work is bold. And even when he just draws someone standing there or walking there's tension, there's mood, there's danger, there's menace, there's excitement. Doesn't have to be Batman swinging or, Snake Eyes striking a cool pose with his sword and his Uzi. The next three covers are freaking awesome. I like out loud 2 days ago when the next one showed up online. I was like, yes! Oh my gosh, yes! Okay.
I'll have what he's having.
Back to the show. Cover B is another black and white Andy Kubert only. I have nothing to add except that it's great. And then cover C is the 1 in 10 variant drawn by Brad Walker and colored by Francesco Segala. And this cover is Stalker flying at us with the jetpack, and looming much larger behind him is Cobra Commander with his battle mask, and then some holding a globe with a snake around it, and then behind him just some nighttime sky with stars. And as a response to what I just said about just a cool pinup for a cover, also sort of behind Stalker it's a little hard to tell if it's an explosion, like he's flying away from an explosion, or the thrust of the jet is so exaggerated that it fills that bottom quarter of the cover. If you are going to, I think he might be flying from an explosion. If you're going to have a cool shot of a Joe, do this. Have their pose super active and dynamic, right? And I'm sort of thinking of all 5 of Brad Walker's 1 in 10 variants for these first 5 issues. All the Joes have an accessory, a weapon. They're all doing something. Their poses are all drastically different from each other. Stalker is looking past us, slightly below us because of how his head is cocked. Cobra Commander, again, there's this M word that I think of when I think of villains in comics. Menace, right? Cobra Commander is menacing.
I thought it was mwahaha.
And it's not just, it's not just Stalker like standing there with the jump jetpack. It's not just Cobra Commander standing there with a globe and a snake. And this is not like a sideways swipe at the covers to issue number 1 of Cobra Commander, which have a lot of sort of just Cobra Commander standing there. And then not only are the figures really active, and Brad Walker has this. I don't think I've liked his work as much as this, and I have liked his work for a while on Green Lantern and stuff, but I haven't really followed him because he's mostly a DC guy, and I'm not much of a DC guy these days. But he manages to mix both sort of spotted blacks, some inking of shadows to really accentuate the light sources on these characters, like all these explosions around them. And then also he's doing some noodling. He's doing some little fine line hatching and detailing. And so his covers are both bold in sort of a Dave Johnson way, but also sort of, quote, hot and modern in a, Jim Lee way. And then Segala's colors are just so handsome, and Segala on this 302 cover helps to separate Stalker from Cobra Commander, because Stalker has a lot of yellow on him because of the flame and explosions, and Cobra Commander is all in cool blues and greens. And so there is a strong separation of warm and cool on this cover. And thank you, designers at Skybound. Cobra Commander does sit in front of the G.I. Joe logo type. It's not like the blue stripe and the RO of Hero are in front of his helmet, which has happened occasionally with parts of Joe characters on G.I. Joe covers these last 15 years.
Here's a fun fact. You're looking at this, you'd think that the sky behind might be like a photo of the sky that's been sort of superimposed or something. But actually, all of those little stars are in the original inks. It's a black background with white flecks. So I imagine that maybe Brad Walker has taped off the cover and laid down loads of black ink and then just flicked white out or something with a toothbrush or some such to create all of those dots.
Yes. In doing that, he's being a little bit more of an artist's artist. It's okay to let the colorist do that extra work, but it's really cool if it's there on the original art, and you have to be a little more technically confident to pull that off. Very, very powerful cover. For all of my Talking Joe nagging about characters centered in the panel or pages that are symmetrical, this is one of those cases where I'm A-okay with Stalker being centered in the cover for three reasons. The offset of Cobra Commander, his head on the right, his hand and the globe and the snake on the left, so strongly divides this cover into thirds. And if any of my former students are listening, I just did a critique this week, and I said to several seniors, you should investigate the rule of thirds. And also, if you're going to do 5 covers that connect, there's a little more latitude to have one of those 5 characters have something sort of symmetrical and centered, because certainly the other 4 aren't going to. And then the final cover, which is cover D, is by Mike Mayhew. And is this only available from his website, Mark?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. So you can spend more money by getting like more signatures or certificates of authenticity, but the basic one is $20, and it is Scarlett, looking a little away from us, but we are lower than her. She's not looking at us, but she's sort of looking down at us, and she's pointing her crossbow at us, and she has a very cool gun, and she's cropped pretty smartly. You got to be good to crop at the knees, and Mayhew does pull it off because he's not quite exactly cropping at the knees, but he's very close. And starkly, there is no background, but it's all white. And you don't often get all white backgrounds in comics, right? Think of Wolverine and Batman and Daredevil, right? A lot of covers take place at night, or think of G.I. Joe. A lot of covers the backgrounds are jungle or explosions. And Mayhew is one of those artists who, in sort of the Alex Ross mold, neither of these guys invented this, but Mayhew hires models and draws from reference, which is a little unusual for comics, because comics have to be drawn so fast. although less uncommon for comic book covers. But when I see a Mike Mayhew cover, I can see the model, which is both kind of cool and also a little distracting. But Mayhew is a talented artist. He's done some G.I. Joe covers before. I like them okay. I think he's slightly miscast for G.I. Joe. This is not a cheesecake cover. This is not like a babe pinup of Scarlett. She's definitely attractive and alluring, but this is not about like her butt or her breasts. This is about, her being cool and with cool weapons. But Mayhew's art is pretty, and he did a New Avengers annual like 10 years ago during Dark Reign that I think focused on, I forget, like Hawkeye and one of the Dark Avengers. And it was cool to see him do interior pages because he's so much a cover artist. But his stuff, I could tell that he's like really thinking of sort of each panel as like a reference photo to get the likeness and the poses right in a way that is not the sort of, like standard comic book artist, like just start scribbling on a page, knocking in characters, doing, stick figures and background planes. So Mayhew is a different kind of illustrator who I think is a good fit for some comics covers, but not my first choice for G.I. Joe covers, though this is a very handsome one.
Yeah, I looked at this and I thought to myself, I wonder if he's basing the figure on Cameron Diaz. Thought there's a bit of her there in the face.
Huh.
Could be wrong, but...
Yeah, what does happen is some, and this was happening with G.I. Joe action figures during Pursuit of Cobra, where the figures were informally being sort of, quote, cast as actors, both for the figure sculpts and also for the package art. And some of them you can definitely guess who. And, that's fun. So it's very possible for an artist to hire a model, draw from it, or take a photo and draw from it, and then draw the face, and then also look at photos of someone else and start to incorporate those features. So yes, I can see a Cameron Diaz resemblance here. That may be coincidental, that may be on purpose. It's also possible that the model kind of looks like Cameron Diaz.
Could just be a similarity. Yeah, so we had Baroness last issue, Scarlett this issue, next issue is Lady J. I do wonder how long he'll keep on going. At what point will he run out of female characters to draw? I guess he's got...
Dr. Biggles Jones.
That's probably the next one.
Dr. Burkhart, although she's dead. I do want to. I do want to tip my hat.
I'd like to see the Dr. Burkhart one.
It's just a corpse. I do want to tip my hat to Mike Mayhew here on one aspect of the cover that I really appreciate, which is that Scarlett's leg straps here look like red leather. They do not look like red satin or red Twizzlers with light bulbs in them, which is how everything red on Scarlett looked in IDW Real American Hero comics for the last 15 years. And when we briefly talked about all the variants for 301 last episode, I pointed out the Rick Leonardi variant cover, which I love. And that color artist, John Callis, not my favorite colorist, but did a nice job with that cover, except for what I would consider like two red, shiny, glowing red parts of Scarlett. And I very much appreciate here that it's a dull red, a brownish red. It's not incandescent.
Good. Right. So next up is a plot breakdown.
Plot breakdown.
On Cobra Island, casino-going pensioners and troops alike have been transfigured into zombies with a taste for forbidden meat by the mutant zombie bomb. Serpentor Khan rallies the Horde to take over Cobra and move to Springfield. At Arlington, the Joes attend the funeral for Wade Collins, folding a flag and presenting it to his widow. At the Springfield Community Center, Cobra Commander delivers bad news on the mutant bomb. And with the threat of a zombie invasion, he mobilizes his forces, recalling all units from other locations. At the Revanche HQ, Alpha 001 is monitoring the evolving situation at Cobra Island with a view to exploiting the situation. In Utah at the pit, Stalker tells Mongoose and the other new Joes about Wade Collins, while in the command center, Duke monitors the developments with Cobra. And finally, in the Sierras, Snake Eyes and Scarlett cook rabbit stew. They are brought a timber wolf pup. Snake Eyes talks, but is told to be quiet. And then they shag.
Oh my god.
What way to end the issue? We don't have to start there, Tim. So what struck me? Shall I start, Tim?
Yeah, I just talked about covers for 45 minutes.
Yeah. So what struck me about this issue, which I very much enjoyed, was very different tones. You've got kind of the zombie horror comedy aspect of that Cobra Island, and then you sort of have that very contrasting somber funeral scene, and that's, if you're thinking about sort of like, scenes with heft and gravitas and feeling in terms of G.I. Joe, I think that's about as heavy as we've ever had. So a real punch there, but it's sort of contrasting with the much less grounded out there zombie horror on Cobra Island. And we again do have a mix of a few different plots here, just sort of within the page count. We've got the funeral, we've got Serpenter on Cobra Island, we're back at Springfield with Cobra Commander, we're back at the pit where they're talking about who Wade Collins is and explaining this to some of the characters didn't know him so well. And then we're back in the High Sierra, and we'd sort of flash into another scene in the pit in the command center with Duke and Mainframe, and then we're back again into the High Sierras. So
plus Revanche headquarters.
Oh, and Revanche as well. So that's an awful lot of zipping about within a story which doesn't feel like it's zipping about. It feels like a very measured pace, and so a lot of different, touching in with these different cast of characters, and some of this is immediate, some of this is sort of slow build. And I heard an interview with the editor Alex Antony who sort of noted something which really sort of struck me, which was when sort of describing Larry Hama, is that he doesn't just have the single through plots that you get from a lot of comics these days. He doesn't just have a sort of an A plot and then juggling a B plot alongside it. He'll also have the C plot, D plot, E plots here, there, and everywhere. And that's because he's not necessarily just built writing for the current issue or the next issue, but knowing that he's got some room to play with, having written 300 issues of the thing, and not every writer can expect or would necessarily want to have a really long run on a book these days. The most that they could hope for is that they get their 4 issues, and anything else above that is gravy. And when you've only got a limited a number of issues to play with, or a limited run to play with, it's less of a luxury that you can do that world building, and sort of really lay down some character work and future work that might not pay dividends until many issues ahead. So general observation there that sort of really struck me when talking about Hama's writing, which ties in nicely with this idea of there being so many different characters and scenes.
I will add to that. Hama has said, well, the book always has an A plot and a B plot, and then I'll cut somewhere else, and 4 Joes somewhere else are already starting their mission, and we didn't even see the beginning of it, or them leaving the pit, and that's the C plot. And a couple issues from now, the A plot wraps up, and the B plot becomes the A plot, and the C plot becomes the B plot, and then by then I'm introducing a new C plot, which might technically be the D plot if the A plot is still running. And so he knows he's doing this, and I think also I think some of this is how he writes, and some of this is a necessity of G.I. Joe because there's so many characters. I haven't read a whole bunch of his, let's say, Wolverine issues recently, such that I could make a comparison. But I think we can extrapolate that if Hama were writing Batman or Daredevil solo books, even though there are enough villains and supporting characters, you could write it like this issue of G.I. Joe. I don't think you would. And so some of this is out of a kind of necessity. And also, people writing letters to Daredevil, very few of them are saying, like, do you remember Daredevil's second wife? Bring her back from the Bendis run. Or sorry, maybe his first wife. But, after Elektra, like the second, whatever. But, every month people are writing in, or at conventions, they're saying, who I really miss? I really miss this G.I. Joe toy that I had in, and Hama will think, oh yeah, I haven't reintroduced that character in a while. Maybe I can think of a way for them to be in the story. So I think some of this is also audience expectation and his reaction to it. It's like, okay, well, if I do a story where they're in the Arctic, I could throw in one or two Arctic guys. Oh, well, maybe it's going to be about the Arctic Sea, but I could throw in Deep Six, or, oh, then I should probably use the whale, that kind of thing. Okay, and then in terms of my reaction to the issue, I also got the same thing that you said, which is the shift in tone and the funny, fantastic zombie story on Cobra Island with the serious and somber. It's not just that a G.I. Joe character has died, and it's not just that it is a G.I. Joe character in the military who is getting a military funeral. It's that Larry Hama in this comic series has 2 or 3 times before taken several pages out to have a serious scene like this, where the reader bears witness. Is it 43, where Hawk and Stalker are at the wall, right? That's the flashback, the footnote in this issue, right?
Yep, that's right.
And
Funeral of Flag.
Yes, which I haven't read in a long time, so I don't recall that.
That includes the introduction of
oh yes,
of Duke and Roadblock as they shoot down a rattler.
Right, which is totally badass. I say that because a friend of mine owns that page.
Oh right, yeah.
Roadblock's first appearance. But also, is it chapter 3 of The Death of Snake Eyes, which is the it's a wordless issue, right? And it's an entire issue of just the Joes saying goodbye to Snake Eyes. And then is it 263? Is that the Memorial Day issue?
Some gave all, I think.
Yes, the cover is all the deceased Joes running at us, and like each 3 pages, Hama is checking in with various characters who've passed away. And then, fourthly, Hama is a vet, and Hama was in Vietnam. And even though these G.I. Joe characters, in terms of the timeline, they weren't really in Vietnam anymore, but in terms of the story, they were in Vietnam. But, a vet who is writing a story about active duty soldiers who are burying one of their own with such specific imagery as, the Vietnam Memorial, the wall, once again, there is no comic book like G.I. Joe. That it's long running, that it's got this writer associated with it, that it's based on a toy, that it's vehicle based, that it's had 3 publishers. And I know some other comics have had 3 publishers, but this combination of elements, and that Hama writes it the way that he does, like reading those scenes, reading the somber scenes in this issue and thinking of the cover, even with all the fantastic stuff in this comic where a character like Serpentor, like Dr. Mindbender, like Snake Eyes have come back from the dead, there's still this grounding, and there's still this, I don't know if lesson is the right word, but reminder, that this is fun and these are just stories, but these aren't just stories, and this is serious. I feel like that is what the story, that's what the writer is saying to us.
Yeah, it's, I mean, worth noting that this sequence of the, let's call it funeral, is 5 pages, of which 4 are silence.
Yeah.
So, letting you fill in the blanks yourselves to some degree, and not dumbing it down. And one of my thoughts looking at these pages was that I'm sure there was an enormous and disproportionate amount of time into researching this and making sure that the protocols, the uniforms, the uniform for each character were all appropriate, and sort of to be as sort of honor and respect as much as possible the real life military from who would have experienced things such as this.
Yeah, page 7 in particular, where the Joes are folding the flag. I thought, I have read Larry Hama plots before, not just G.I. Joe. And pages 5 and 6 and 7 at Arlington, I thought, oh, Hama, I can sort of see the photos for reference that Hama is sending to Mooneyham with the plot. Like if it's a particular gun, if it's a particular sword move, we know from interviewing lots of artists on this book that he's sending a photo. If it's a particular vehicle, we might assume that that's an image that comes from Diana Davis. But, this scene, certainly, Hama is going to insist that Mooneyham gets it right. And I think everyone involved knows that they have to get it right.
Mm.
And then again, in terms of, this page 7 where they're folding the flag, I haven't read a lot of Sergeant Rock stories or any DC war comic, The Losers, Haunted Tank. Marvel hasn't published many war comics in the last 20 or 30 years. They've been mostly like Nick Fury or Punisher comics, sort of disguised. And I don't say that cynically. They've been great. There was that War is Hell miniseries by Garth Ennis and Howard Chaykin. But this page 7, like what comic of the last 20 years is going to A, have this scene, or B, have this scene be an entire page? And of course that speaks to Hama, but also I think it speaks to the readership of G.I. Joe, that we sort of expect it or appreciate it. Like I have to think that people reading this comic for a long time or getting back into it these last 2 months got to this page and thought, yeah, and didn't think like, oh man, I want some more ninja action, or like, but what about the zombies? It's like,
it's, I guess, doing a few things. It's respecting the character. It's respecting more generally sort of, the military and those who serve and sacrifice, but also respecting the readers as well, because this is a character who's just died and who's been with us as readers potentially for 38 years or so. To have someone in your life, even if a fictional character, feeling the consequences of their death, it can feel like, I guess, a real loss in some form.
And also the note that Wade redeemed himself, that he was a good guy, he became a bad guy, and some time ago he became a good guy again. So that he then sacrifices himself, it adds weight to it. And I very much appreciate the scene back at the pit later on when, is it Mongoose? Is that who says?
Mongoose is the character who's said, I'm curious about how Wade Collins rated in interment at Arlington along with the G.I. Joe honor guard. After all, he was a former Crimson Guard. And then Stalker fills in the blanks, yeah.
So, I don't know how much Alex Antone is, actively editing this book and is having a conversation with Hama. And, Hama might have thought, I really want one of the new guys to ask one of the old guys about this. Or Hama might have thought, lapsed readers or new readers might need some context here. But what I thought I saw here was like perhaps an editorial note, like, "Hey, Larry, I think for new readers or lapsed readers, you should remind everyone."
And you've got the new guys there. It's Mongoose, Multo, Helix, and I think Sherlock over Mongoose's shoulder.
Yeah, and at the same time, I'm not trying to say that Hama, like didn't think of how important such a scene was, and it was definitely editor. What I'm saying is, this feels like in the creative process, this feels like the kind of thing that an editor might suggest.
And if you don't remember the first telling of this story back in issue 43, or its retelling in 155, and possibly even another retelling somewhere else, for example, probably Snake Eyes Declassified, tangentially, possibly somewhere else again as well, then obviously those are very specific comics you would have had to have read, and not necessarily recently published. So for new and for old readers alike, it's a good reminder and a retelling.
The second page of this scene, where Stalker explains to the new guys, struck me as, even though it's a couple flashbacks, and even though you come out of this Stalker telling them with another big panel of them sort of being sad, to be able to have a page where half of it or a third of it is the LERP group humping the boonies, right? Like actually on patrol in Vietnam, is a way, even though that's not an action scene, it's several people walking in the jungle on patrol, but it counterbalances the previous pages of a funeral, because it's again, not an action scene, but sort of potentially action. It's active, right? It's not people standing around in the rain. It's like, men on patrol. And so I thought that was also a smart sort of part of the shifting tones of the issue.
In that same scene, just following the retelling of Wade's story, recounting issue 43 essentially, it's Multo who then says at the end of it, he says, sorry for the butchering of this, Magkakasama Tayo, which is Tagalog or Filipino and means, best I can tell, we're in this together. So sort of just echoing that like they're a military brother, and even if he was, went astray and joined Cobra and has come back, they're all part of that, I guess, military family and common bond that they have.
While we're focusing on the funeral scene, I'll point out that the page that takes us out of it, which is 5 horizontal panels, where the camera starts up in the air looking down at the mall, and then zooms down in slightly up below ground level at the wall itself, and then over to the statue. I've been there, and it's really moving. I don't have any family that died in Vietnam. I have a friend of my dad's served in Vietnam and then became a lawyer. But I went there 15 years ago, and it's really moving. It's just really moving. I think about the architecture, the controversial architecture of having something so subtle as landscaping, right? Because at a certain spot you can't see the wall because it's sort of lower than you, and you have to walk around to the other side where the ground has been recessed, and then you walk up to the wall, and it is an artful sort of dent in the ground, a very, very big one, and then you have all these names etched on this black surface, and it's chronological, it's by year, but there are also spaces on the edges. The names don't go all the way to the side of each panel because as I don't know what the phrase is, as information has come forward or forensics have surfaced, the government has found a few people who did indeed perish in Vietnam, and so names can be added without like having to do it at the end, And I think what my dad told me when we were there is that after the wall itself was built, there was still this urge, this push to have something more traditional as a memorial. that names on a wall, and a wall that you can't see from one direction because it's sort of at ground level, like below grade, that it's not traditional enough, and maybe it's not proper. And so the statue of a white man, a black man, and a Hispanic man or a Latino man as soldiers was added later, and the placement of it is that they're sort of coming out of the brush, and they can see the wall based on their sight line. It's just all really moving.
The statue is called Three Soldiers or Three Servicemen. It's a bronze statue by Frederick Hart, unveiled on Veterans Day, November 1984, on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., part of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, and first representation of an African American on the National Mall. It will be familiar to readers of G.I. Joe, as it also featured in issue 42, Ties That Bind, which echoes, I guess, this issue, because that was the issue that introduced Wade Collins as a sort of named character, where I think it's Stalker and Snake Eyes are at the wall, and they encounter Wade, who then sort of reveals himself as being former comrade, and noticing that his name was not engraved.
Right, because some of the mystery was had he died or not.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then nearby there is another piece of statuary of figurative art, and that's the Vietnam Women's Memorial, which commemorates the hundreds of thousands of women who served in Vietnam, many of whom were nurses. And that is not depicted in this scene in issue 302, and that's okay. That's sort of to the side of the story. But in terms of like how powerful and moving a memorial can be, how architecture and art can be healing. You know, like growing up in the 80s, there were movies and TV shows like China Beach and Tour of Duty and Miss Saigon and G.I. Joe and the Nam, and you know, like this war is less prominent in, you know, popular storytelling, and so to have G.I. Joe still anchored to it is particular. Okay, so thoughts about the rest of the issue. I want to again tip my hat to color artist Francesco Segala for nothing new to add here from the previous episode, but really nice coloring, a lot of flat colors or flat colors with very subtle texture, but not so much rendering where things are shiny, like they're made out of satin or chrome, and a very, very deft change in color palette from scene to scene. So once again, Serpentor, that's in yellows and greens, right? But then it cuts down to the sort of zombie hordes in front of him, and that's all in reds and oranges. But then when it cuts to Arlington, you know, that opening scene is green and purple, right? The green makes sense because there's all this grass. I did have a little sort of moment of confusion when on page 6 we see the Joes starting to fold the flag, and I thought, wait, they're all in blue, isn't that the Navy? Whenever we've seen the Joes in their dress uniforms, they've been in green. And I remembered, and I don't know if did this come up in a previous Talking Joe episode, or did this come out in my non-Talking Joe life? Somewhere in the last couple of years.
I think we've talked about it. I think we were talking to Diana about it, possibly.
Okay. So, but nowadays, Army dress uniforms are blue, which is, I think, a return to how it was in like World War II, and it was green for several decades, but it's blue now. But you know, that scene. Oh, one last comment about the funeral. The last time that G.I. Joe, not the comic book, but the brand, had a funeral in the rain. What was it, Mark?
Is this a movie thing?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know. Tell me, Tim.
In G.I. Joe: The Rise of Cobra, when Channing Tatum drives his motorcycle up to that funeral, and I can't even remember who it is because I have problems with that movie. Even though that movie is not great, that scene looks awesome because it's raining, and I think according to the director commentary, I think Stephen Summers was saying on the DVD director commentary that they hadn't planned for that, but they got there that day to shoot, and it was raining, and they thought, well, it's going to look great, let's shoot.
It's a kind of cinematic rule, isn't it? The funerals, it's got to be rainy.
Yes, it is definitely harder to shoot a movie scene with hundreds of people and equipment that you want to keep dry. So anyway, lots of great color work in here, separating scenes from each other.
And the pit in green, the pit shrouded by green light. You'll be glad to see, Tim.
Yeah, but it's how the light it's how the light behaves that I'm okay with. Okay. I'll say one last thing. I'll say one last thing about the funeral. We remarked in our last episode,
version 2, version 3,
how Chris Mooneyham's art does look something like Joe Kubert's, and he went to the Joe Kubert school, so that makes some kind of sense. At the funeral scene, I realized just how much Chris Mooneyham's art looks like Andy Kubert's art and Adam Kubert's art as well. And that may be such a subtle distinction to our listeners as to be unhelpful. Andy and Adam and Joe Kubert, there are a lot of similarities in how they draw, but I also note a lot of differences, and I sort of start to see all three of them swirling around in some of the faces, in some of the rain, in some of the shadows under eyes, in some of the abbreviating of faces when they are far away. Chris Mooneyham in this issue does continue to do a lot of the straight on stuff. Note on pages 2 and 3, particularly on page 2, Serpentor Khan, straight on, straight on, straight on. And then on page 3, even though his head is cocked a little bit, we're still straight on, we're still straight on. And then you turn the page, and it's such a relief that Mooneyham finally pulls the camera back. This is page 4, to show Serpentor Khan walking down the stairs toward the crowd of zombies, and most of that page tries to keep doing that kind of thing. And I'll just repeat what I said in our last episode. I think Chris Mooneyham is the right artist, is a right artist for this series, but his storytelling, his pulling the camera back, showing figure in ground, and tipping the camera at angles to show more 2-point and 3-point perspective is less developed. And he does seem really interested in doing a lot of straight on stuff. And, at the funeral, when we see Throwdown sitting with his sunglasses on, and that's his sister, right? Had we sort of wondered if perhaps Wade Collins' daughter had slightly been forgotten? Did that come up on Facebook, Mark?
So Wade Collins had sort of adopted Sean and I think it's Heather, the sister, and I don't know if the wife, the mother, Mrs. Collins, has ever been named, or if she has, can't remember it. But in that Snake Eyes story drawn by Mark Bright, on when he was brainwashed and went over to Barovia on this mission and was almost shot by Major Blood, and then he came back. He rescued this girl and he brought her back and brought her to Wade Collins, who said that she could stay with them and join their family. It's that daughter that has not been seen since, and Larry Hama in one of the letter pages said that Sean doesn't have a sister, I think.
Okay, right, okay.
So that one of the sisters has been remembered, but the sort of second one has not. Seems to have vanished and not been remarked on since.
Right.
But there's a potential storyline that could be filled in.
Another special missions issue. What happened to the title of this issue? A Kid from Barovia.
Wow. Writing itself.
Oh man, the Adam Kubert face that I see is on the third to last page, where Scarlett says at the bottom of a page, "We have a visitor." And if you showed me this panel by itself, I would say, "Oh, that's Adam Kubert." And if an artist happens to draw like Adam Kubert, or is trying to draw like Adam Kubert, that is totally fine with me. Also, I'll point out, I don't know when Chris Mooneyham was at the Kubert School, but Andy Kubert and Adam Kubert did teach there also. So it's not just like they went there and they draw sort of like their father. And so people may sort of draw like all of them because people may go to that school. If that Kubert founded the school and 3 Kuberts taught there. And so other people have gone there and may have had a combination of teachers, including more than one Kubert.
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to point out the fun thing about page 1 that
Okay.
that I so brilliantly thought of immediately when I saw page 1, and I couldn't wait to reveal here to show how smart I am, and then you messaged me that you had also figured it out, and then I cynically thought, okay, Mark must have read that on the internet. Mark couldn't have known that on his own.
So I saw on Instagram the colorist Francesco Segala he said my comments have arrived, and he laid out the front covers of the picture, but also lifted up the flap to show the first page of this issue. And in the previews that had been shared online, they shared the preview of the funeral scene. So I'd imagine that would be how the book begun, but it went into this scene there. And just seeing in probably 1 centimeter of size, this picture on my phone on Instagram of this page occupying a tiny bit of the overall picture posted, because it was focusing on the covers of the comps. I could see this.
This is page 1 you're talking about.
Yes. So I saw this image of page 1 and I thought, that person that's been transmigrified by the mutant zombie virus looks an awful lot like a particular image of the mutant leader from Dark Knight Returns, as drawn by Frank Miller and inked most likely by Klaus Janson. And so that's my one of my I spies, that the mutant zombie guy holding aloft the Cobra helmet is an homage to the iconic image of the mutant leader from Dark Knight Returns.
Yes,
one of my favorite.
Very good. Good catch, good eyes. That was also an I Spy, although I was going to blurt it out much sooner into the episode in case it was your I Spy, because I wanted to get the credit for it. We will note for listeners that
let's just note here for the record how clever Tim is. Okay, we'll move on.
We'll note for listeners that this figure is a little bigger and more mutated, and the pose is not the exact same, but this is definitely an homage. This is not a coincidence. Also, dear listeners, if you caught this, this character has shown up. I haven't seen the animated Dark Knight Returns 2-parter that like Warner Animation did, like the directed DVD movies, but Dark Knight, that scene was turned into part of an episode of Batman the Animated Series.
Right. Yeah.
So if you haven't read Dark Knight Returns or haven't read it recently, if this image is in your head somehow, it may be from your TV.
And he's got like a bandolier of severed ears around his person, which is somewhat grisly. And when I was speaking to Diana, Diana Davis, she was saying that she felt like they were able to kind of push the boundaries on what was kind of allowable in the book versus what was happening at IDW, and it felt more adult, a little bit more gory, a little bit more sort of pushing the boundaries of maybe what you could get away with in a G.I. Joe book. And this was one panel that made me think of that, of like, yeah, just having this massive necklace thing of severed ears is one of those things. But then it was page 3. You've got Serpentor shooting one of these zombies in the head, and his head sort of just bursting into a cloud of red mist of brains and blood, and then it twitching and splitching, and then before the zombies descend on it to rip it apart with a growl and a chomp and a snap, crackle, and pop. I spy snap, crackle, and pop.
As sound effects. I've been thinking about this notion of, can this book be more sort of bloody at Image and Skybound than it was at IDW? And Diana has a front row seat. I wonder if in this case the standard changes, because that's not a regular person, that's a zombie. And in the same way that in Transformers comics and movies, you can impale them and tear their arms off and they can scream in agony, Michael Bay. And well, that's just PG-13 because they're just robots and it's just oil. But you cannot do that in, a G.I. Joe comic or like an X-Men cartoon. Also, in terms of the changing standard, I'm reminded that, Real American Hero is rated T for teen. And in some of the discussion from Skybound before this book launched, there was a little sort of talk of, what are the new G.I. Joe and Transformers books? Who are they for? Like, teen, T for teen. And I'm reminded that there was a span of issues at IDW, and I don't remember exactly when it was, if it was like 170 to 200 or 190 to 220, but somewhere in there, in very small print, on the back cover, over the barcode. Do you remember this? This is the Larry Hama Real American Hero. Okay. Did it say suggested for mature readers or like for older readers?
It rings a bell. I wouldn't be able to say specifically when that happened and when it stopped, but
I remember being really bummed by that because I don't think it was reflected by the contents. Like that suddenly there was this label. It's not as if those issues were harsher. And B, I know everything's changed, and this comic is not aimed at 8-year-olds who are watching Transformers episodes and seeing advertisements on TV for these issues. This is not 1985. But, this brand is still about, selling toys from a toy company, even if the toys are mostly selling to adult collectors. But I sort of bristle at this notion that, Batman and Ninja Turtles and G.I. Joe and Transformers should or have to age up with their audience. Like, well, I'm in my 30s and 40s now, and it should be grimmer because I'm older and I can handle it, or we can handle it now. And I think there is a way to make a Turtle story, a Batman story, a G.I. Joe story that is both compelling for 8-year-olds and also 45-year-olds and also jaded 45-year-olds. But I also think that some of it is like the sort of evolving standard. 20 years ago, there was no Walking Dead, and the zombie genre was much less prominent. And everyone knows about killing zombies nowadays, even if they've never read or watched The Walking Dead. I'm not talking about Hama doing any kind of homage to Kirkman. I just mean as a pop culture phenomenon, the way that Batman and Turtles are. And Walking Dead is just a violent story. Like zombie stories are just violent stories. So I think some of this is the it's oil, not blood, like Transformers parallel argument. And B, Diana must surely be right that someone at IDW or someone at Hasbro, there's a different calculus right now. But also, I don't need G.I. Joe to be grim and gritty just because I'm not 10 anymore. And Hama knows that. And so I don't think he's writing it differently.
But also a 10-year-old seeing a zombie's head explode is probably most likely just be like, cool.
No, right. Sorry. Yes, that's right. No, thank you. That's I interrupted myself and forgot my third point. Also, in the last 3 years, all the 10-year-olds have lived through a global pandemic, a massive national and global trauma. And so I feel like Halloween last year and 2 years ago, It's like 10-year-olds, more 10-year-olds wanted to see R-rated movies, or like more 10-year-olds got to go to haunted houses. And back in, 2017, grown-ups might have said no. It's like, I think about this when I give gifts to my niece and nephew. I think, okay, well, second grade and sixth grade, is this book too spicy, or is it too heavy, or is it too advanced? And part of it, I'll think, well, they did just live through the pandemic. Yes, I was surprised when Serpentor Khan blew up someone's head with a pistol. But
it's a good point as well that could part of this zombies be that there's something that they can kill which isn't your regular flesh and blood. So in the way that we've had a lot of bats and revanche cyborgs and revanche bats, etc., that it gives something that where we can see casualties without it being a real person, that if it is a zombie being offed, that maybe that's a little bit more palatable.
Okay, so of this scene and Chris Mooneyham's storytelling, and also Hama's scripting, I felt like I'm missing a half page between last issue and this issue, or maybe a full page of Hama writing a little more about actually what is happening on Cobra Island. And I think A, he's going to get there, and B, with the scene with Cobra Commander talking to the citizens of Springfield, I think I have a little bit of a substitute. But I feel like because Chris Mooneyham is not focusing on what the actual zombies are doing in his visual storytelling, and because Hama has this sort of abbreviated, sort of one note, like they're eating stuff, and G.I. Joe is not a zombie comic, so I don't think I need lots of scenes of zombies eating whatever.
Each other.
Right. Do you feel like that like, it's like, okay, I was clear back in the 290s that there were a lot of vacationers and retirees gambling in a casino. And now I feel like I've sort of lost the thread of like, okay, casino, island, people, like, I don't know if I'm being clear. Like, okay, the bomb, I don't know if it was an incendiary explosion such that the like hotel was wrecked, or if it was a biological explosion, like a gas. But Mooneyham is drawing a lot of wreckage here. And that may be because people are fighting each other. But I feel like I need a half a page of scene of like one zombie person and another zombie person sort of acknowledging the change. And I know there's been a little bit of dialogue, like I all of a sudden have this urge for flesh, but I feel like something is missing in context. Does this make sense?
A little bit. I mean, it's they've sort of fast forwarded a little bit to this sort of zombie rampage going on, as if it has been established and been going on for a little while. And we didn't necessarily have the setup to really kind of explain what the bomb was going to do, but we can kind of figure it out. And it seemed clear to me that that they've been turned into these sort of like mutated zombie type characters who look a bit freaky in different ways, but they retain most of their initial personalities, but with a strong craving for eating flesh. And it talks about the fact that they're stuck on an island. There's no other source of human protein here other than themselves, so Serpentor's grand plan is to get off the island and find other sources. But so yeah, you had an island full of, which was basically holidaying pensioners in the casino, and cobras. We've had the bomb go off. They've both been turned into zombies. So we've got an island now full of zombified cobras and zombified casino goers.
Okay, I think what I want is like 3 panels where a retiree and another retiree are doing a little bit of dialogue about how like they used to be married, but now they just want flesh. Or there's like an alley viper who's like attacking another viper, and like the regular viper, was further away from the bomb and is less mutated and is saying something like, no, 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 we're on the same side, or like, no, 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 like the Cobra zombies have to stick together. Let's go after the old people. I feel like there's maybe because this setup also feels like I know the Joes just went there to rescue someone and leave, but I feel like this story, this plot thread, is missing one element. Like, we haven't checked back in with Dr. Mindbender, and even though he's a zombie the same as Khan, and even though he's a zombie the same as all the Cobras and all the retirees, I feel like Mindbender would be able to resist it a little bit and would be doing something different. Like, I have to get off myself to find the antidote, or period. Or like someone in the world of the Joes, whether it's an actual Joe or someone like Wade Collins, who's not a Joe, would like need to rescue one particular person from the zombie thing. I feel like, and Hama makes it up as he goes along, so this criticism might be entirely true and warranted. I feel like Hama doesn't know yet what he's doing with the zombie thing. And because it's one note, like Khan is going to lead them, it's like, well, that's sort of the same as it was before. Khan was going to lead them. You know, it's like, well, Khan was going to lead Cobra and the Cobras on the island and like take the vacationers hostage, or maybe he was going to leave the vacationers there and lead some invasion with the Cobras. And now that they're all zombies, it's sort of the same thing, except instead of like shooting people and conquering America, they're going to eat people. And so I know that is very different, but in terms of the sort of the vector of it, I feel like Hama hasn't figured out to my satisfaction an entree for me, a way for me to get into this thread. And maybe it's like the Dr. Mindbender or like Jeffrey the Techno Viper. I need something else to happen in the zombie story on Cobra Island to create a difference. Also, a slight pet peeve that Chris Mooneyham is drawing a bunch of Cobra soldiers as zombies. And there were definitely all kinds of Vipers there. And I've always been very sort of particular and protective from the 1985 to 1986 switch and upgrade. You know, like there are episodes of the show where the animators or the storyboard artists continued to draw Cobra soldiers and also Vipers. And it's sort of like the costume upgrades in, is it season 3 of Star Trek The Next Generation, when they go from the thin jumpsuits with no padding to the pants with the like pullover jackets that have a little bit of padding. And I think to reasonably save a little money on wardrobe, Paramount, like all the background extras on the Enterprise, like in season 3 and 4, continued to wear the older, cheaper suits. They didn't need to make like 20 new ones. But it's a little conspicuous for someone like me who's like looking for that kind of thing. It's like, wait, why didn't he in the background and her in the background get the new, nicer uniform? And so in my mind, all the Cobra soldiers became Vipers, and they like got rid of all the old Cobra soldier outfits. Or Cobra soldiers like were the lower rung, and you sort of quickly graduate to being a Viper. But in like, even despite an upcoming Andy Kubert cover, I think it's like, no, there's sort of no more like Cobra soldiers in 2023. It's Vipers.
Yeah, it seems to be a definite preference of Mooneyham in terms of the Cobras he's drawing on page 12. There's that kind of half-page, almost full-page splash of the Springfield Community Center with the aspids coming down, and he's sort of redesigned most of the stuff here. The aspid has a bit of a redesign to it. It's kind of looks like it's almost got kind of an open mouth to it with a gun turret sort of inside its mouth, and he sort of
and the ferret on the bottom.
Ferret's got a little bit of a design tweak to it, and then he's got, he's drawing these Cobra troopers, Cobra infantry, in that close to sort of classic design, but with a sort of like more angular tweak. So he's got like kind of this flair to the sci-fi flair to the shoulders, very angular helmet. It's got a Cobra logo on its forehead, and the detailing on the like web gear stuff is coloured in red, which could have been a colorist choice. But so he's sort of redesigning a little bit as he goes along. I guess a benefit of having Cobra Troopers in Zombified is that you get to see a bit more of their face, whereas with something more like a Viper, classic Viper, you would a lot of their across the Vipers, a lot of their faces are quite covered up, but yeah, could have a shattered windscreen or whatever. Front
yes, and there
faceplate.
is historical precedent back to the early 1990s. The Toxo Zombie is a Toxo Viper 2 with a somewhat smashed faceplate, so you can see its eye as it comes to get to you. Yes, and I don't want to pin this all on Mooneyham. This might be Hama's script calling for Cobra soldiers, not Vipers. This might be Hama's script being a little vague, referring to like various Cobra soldiers. And Mooneyham thinks, I will draw the 1982 Cobra soldier. Notably, Mooneyham is drawing this sort of more angular helmet on Cobra Commander. And what do you think of that?
That is okay. What struck me was that we're seeing a sort of a move back to a more classic looking Cobra Commander. I think the SL Gallant Cobra Gallant Cobra Commander was generally sporting sort of more intricately designed costume Cobra Commander headgear, whereas this very much is sort of linking back to the V1 with the chrome dome look to him, but also with that animated white kind of stripe down the center of his helmet, which has typically been a Sunbow cartoon look to Cobra Commander rather than the toy or comic. So it's interesting that we're seeing that, but the cloak I think has become an iconic part of his look as well. So it's very much sort of crying Cobra Commander, and I guess angular, sort of maybe it's a metaphor for a more sort of spiky and dangerous Cobra Commander as well. Don't get too close to him.
As we got to the Springfield scene, I thought, well, okay, when Serpentor Khan shoots the zombie, I thought, oh, Mark and I are going to have something to talk about, because when Cobra Commander puts two guys in the trunk of a car and shoots that, Mark and I really take notice, because Cobra Commander is sometimes not serious and not deadly. And then 30 issues go by and Hama has him do something really cruel, like not care his son is dead, like, oh my gosh, or like kill two, I forget who they were, guys in the back of a car. And so when a Cobra leader shoots someone in the face, even if it's a zombie, I thought Mark and I are going to talk about this. And then Cobra Commander is giving this really proactive speech, and he refers to getting away from Cobra Island, and like can twist that. And I like that he's back in Springfield.
They didn't waste any time of getting him back to Springfield either, because the last we saw him he was on the whale skidoo thing, whatever you'd call it, but let's not waste the time. Let's get to where he wants to be.
Well, two things. One, as you've noted, some time has passed. It's been a couple days or weeks on the island, like more eating, more destruction of the hotel, and like we jump ahead to the funeral. Like they just got back to the base and they unloaded Wade Collins' corpse, and now we're ahead 3 days or 2 weeks. So that's okay. But also, we don't know where Springfield is. So where was Cobra Commander? He was going from the Gulf of Mexico back to, I don't know, Louisiana or Florida, right? So I've always figured that Springfield is kind of in the middle, but I don't know, maybe it's in South Carolina. Maybe he didn't have far to go. But there are two aspects of this Springfield speech that I really appreciate. One is that we're checking back in with Springfield as a sort of realistic in the G.I. Joe world entity, this Cobra town. the people have bought in. And I feel like a couple times when we've checked back in with Springfield, this has either been skipped or minimized, that the people who live in Springfield, like Millville in issue 99 and 100, Millville was brainwashing. But Springfield, these people believe in the Cobra philosophy, or don't believe in America enough that they will live in this Cobra town. And that is scary. That's really entertaining because Hama can do something with that. And he can make a comment about, disaffected America. Someone like a Wade Collins for whom, and there's a panel here where Stalker refers to it, like America has failed Wade Collins twice. He comes back from Vietnam and he's hurting, and then he can't get a job, right? And so to check back in with not just like Cobra soldiers who are guarding Springfield, like in issue 275, not just Crimson Guardsmen who live in Springfield and are like doing the Cobra dream, but their spouses and kids. So in a general sense, I love that Hama just gets Cobra Commander back to Springfield. And then when Cobra Commander delivers the news about Cobra Island, I love all of their reactions because this is a realistic, I feel like there's a really good bit of sort of emotional closure on this. Wait, how would people feel if you told them that someone that they knew on an island might have been turned into a zombie? Yeah. How might you react? I mean, like as a comparison, right? Hama writes emotional scenes, like the funeral in this very issue, like Scarlett and Snake Eyes on the last 3 pages. But he always does them understated, like when Wolverine is really hurting between Wolverine 75 and like 125, and Jubilee tries to help him, and Jubilee sort of gets sent away, or Wolverine's really tough. Hama always does that with a light touch. He's not, as a writer, like putting emotions on the sleeve. Like you compare that to, again, like who's a long-running writer at Marvel, Chris Claremont on X-Men. Like there are these Shakespearean scenes of sadness and betrayal where, Forge steals Storm's powers with this device, and, Carol Danvers is angry at Rogue for stealing her powers, and Wolverine's going to get revenge, and Cyclops and Jean have this very complicated relationship, and it's psychic, and she's cosmic, and all this stuff. And people like yell, and they cry, and there's a lot of verbose narration in, in 15 years, 17 years of Chris Claremont Uncanny X-Men, right? But this Scarlett and Snake Eyes scene, like, what does she do? What happens in the scene? Well, a 4-legged mammal represents a lot of the emotion of the scene, and Scarlett and Snake Eyes witness it. But those couple of panels aren't more of them talking. And then what happens on the final page? The wolf cub is asleep on their bed, right? That says a lot more than them talking more about Timber or Timber's kin. And then what happens on the final page? Someone wants to say something, and Scarlett shushes, right? And so Hama often says a lot by having characters not say a lot, not say anything. And so to have this scene where across several panels, turn into it now, people on Cobra Island are saying, what? Everybody in the island? My husband is a televiper. He's my brother. How can that be? Right? I'm skipping to the next page. Joseph Frey, he's a viper. My dad, both my parents. And
Jeffrey was there.
No, well, I would love Hama to check back in with a particular techno viper, whether or not it's Jeffrey. And Hama does not listen to this show, so he doesn't know about the wonderful, wonderful backstory you've created for Jeffrey and how he's a favorite character of ours. But
if I will it into existence, maybe.
And then Cobra Commander interrupts them and does a very Cobra Commander thing, which is, your pain is important. My plans are more important. So the big middle panel of Cobra Commander, head and shoulders and hands, when he interrupts them, like, that's such a great Cobra Commander beat. And then this is a like Tim storytelling, like grumpy frown thing. The bottom panel of that page, there's a big disembodied sort of sound effect of the word "what" with an question mark and an exclamation mark. And I think I know who says that from the context. I think that's everyone in the crowd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But because Chris Mooneyham doesn't draw anyone with open mouths, I sort of thought that was someone from off panel, and I would turn the page and someone would walk in, like Serpentor Khan, and he'd say, like, "What? How dare you speak against me? You're all under my domain now." But still, I really like the Cobra Commander bit. I really like the Springfield scene.
Yeah. Slight disconnect between the expressions on their faces and the what?
And you could have like a smaller word balloon sort of behind the WHAAAT with a couple tails pointing to various people. That would also solve the problem if the art is going to look like this. So I wanted to ask you, Mark, what you thought of Cobra Commander, of the Springfield scene, and then the scene that happens right after it.
Yeah, so yeah, it's good. I mean, he's on stage, he's talking with gravitas like a leader. He's not, being ineffectual, spikiness, like I say to him, and it does sort of suggest a little bit more of a menace. And then he's talking about recalling all Cobra units from outposts and secret bases and mobilizing forces like they've never been mobilized before. So, busing and lifting everyone back into Springfield. So, gearing up for something big, giving signals of what could come. It's, it's exciting stuff. And then were you talking about the revanche scene?
Yeah, because we've talked about like how much would Hama continue with this thread?
It sounds like it's continuing to be an important, let's call it a C, what are we calling it? C plots.
Yeah.
In terms of hierarchy, maybe. But so yeah, Alpha 001 and his crew still looking like they're going to play an important part of the series, and with a redesign from Mooneyham and looking quite creepy, quite cool looking design. As much as people have grumbled about seeing the revanche and being overused, I'm not minding this, because at least it's the through line of that ongoing story. I do like sort of that consistency, and it is just 2 pages here, so I'll give that one a pass.
Is Mooneyham drawing the like cocktail waitress on that page? Does it have the right hair? Didn't they all have black hair?
Initially, but Hama did say that wasn't the intent, to make them all look the same.
Okay.
Or so they did start to look slightly different as the plot progressed. So
Okay.
That's all fine. They were initially very much looking the same and having black hair, but increasingly there was more diversity in the mix of the the revanche cocktail waitress robots.
So these 2 pages with Alpha 001 and Revanche, here's another example of Mooneyham doing a lot of medium shot close-ups, not a lot of background, a lot of straight on stuff. And I think he could do this sort of 1 scene per issue. And there's an argument that the like cold, inhuman quality of Alpha 001 might call for sort of more emotional distance in the quote camera placement in the visual storytelling. But since Mooneyham has already done this on page 1 and 2 and 3 with Serpentor Khan and a little bit here and there in the whole issue, I think that panel of Sean with the sunglasses and the white background, the really stark negative space during the funeral and the sisters next to him, I think that is a totally reasonable panel to do straight on and centered. But again, there's more of it happening in this issue than I would like. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, pull out one of the Nitho Diaz artificial intelligence 4-parter, the early 260s, right? Or even in 297, 298, 289, when Shannon Gallant was drawing Alpha 001. Even with Mooneyham's redesign, just compare the quote camera angles that Gallant has, that Nitho Diaz has, of Revanche headquarters outside and inside, the other sort of robots that are working in front of Alpha 001. And, Mooneyham's storytelling in this scene starts to look a little bit like Mike Mignola's. Like, I am just going to draw a lot of this straight on, and there are going to be a lot of interesting blacks, a lot of interesting compositional shapes and shadows. And that's okay. It's not unclear, but I think it is a little limiting. Mark, now another question for you. All right, you were right. Last issue, I was so excited. Last issue was 22 pages, and you said, I think it's a 2-page extra at the beginning, followed by a 20-page issue. And I said, I bet you're wrong. I hope you're wrong. This issue is 20 pages, but there are 2 pages of sketchbook work. And that noise, if you're hearing it in the distance, those are parrots. Those are wild parrots outside.
Wow.
I'm in California. I'm in Southern California, and parrots just hang out on trees here. There are 2 pages of sketchbook work by Chris Mooneyham in issue 302. One of them is a redesign for Alpha 001. And then another is Serpentor Khan, Cobra Commander, and a different take on Cobra Commander's helmet. But I thought, since you just referred to this redesign, and we're talking about the Revanche scene, if you wanted to talk about Chris Mooneyham's sketchbook page for Alpha 001.
Well, I'd guess that this isn't necessarily in place of extra story, but it's a placeholder for a letters page, which they don't yet have, and presumably will start next issue. But yeah, I like the Chris Mooneyham redesign of Alpha 001. I think they've continued to evolve the look of it since his introduction, or its introduction, their introduction back whenever that was, and each artist that have tackled it has continued to kind of evolve the look of it. So I think it's one of those designs that an artist can bring a lot of what they want to draw to it to make it, bring their own twist to it. And I like what they've done with it. I think it sort of reminds me a little bit of Robots from Invincible in terms of the sort of slightly fixed and creepy kind of teeth and grin coming together. But yeah, I've liked what he's done with it so far.
I also, since we sometimes read little bits of key dialogue, I thought it was worth noting here that Mooneyham's notes say, more humanoid face, teeth, gives it a creepier feel. And then this part, which does feel similar to the Shen and Gallant design, basically a, quote, head on an accordion worm-like body filled with hydraulics, wires, and antennae. No legs, arms only when necessary. Yes, I think he's totally allowed to either do a specific redesign or a subtle redesign, a specific redesign where he asks and gets approval, or a subtle redesign where he just draws stuff a little differently because it's his book now. I feel like the Cobra Commander helmet might fall under that latter category. I'll just remind myself with the Alpha 001 stuff that, like 4 years ago in Real American Hero, what seemed like a subplot that was going on for too long and that wasn't being made the most of, artificial intelligence being a threat. As I say this at the end of 2023, I feel like even in the last 3 weeks, just reading some news and hearing some news, I feel like a lot more people are talking about AI than they were 2 months ago and a year ago. AI being potentially very bad. And, this is separate from, artists and writers talking about AI making their lives easier or taking their jobs. And one of the things that's so great about this long-running Larry Hama G.I. Joe comic is that Hama reads a lot, and he reads history and news. And, the brainwave scanner in 1984 seems fantastic. So Hama introducing the brainwave scanner that early, both made the comic more fantastic, but also I think was Hama as a smart person looking ahead. And, some things have caught up with that. So, like, yes, the blue ninjas seemed like a threat that were sort of impossible, but then became surmountable. And I didn't quite get the explanation. I feel like sort of more can be done with Revenge and also at the same time less. But the fact that it's out there, and again, you're right, it's only 2 pages in this issue. I think it's just an opportunity for Hama to explore a theme that might actually be a part of the world, and if G.I. Joe were real, if our reality was the reality of his comic, based on all the other fantastic things that are in it, yes, that would be there. Some version of that would be there.
Mm-hmm. We talked a little bit about the last scene, but I don't know if you'd covered it completely, but it was quite striking to me that last page of the book, we do have a speech bubble from Snake Eyes, and I had kind of speculated what this new clone body who hasn't yet had his vocal cords burnt away, what that means for his ability to speak, because to date we've heard him, Snake Eyes, say 2 things. Back in the day, we heard him say Scarlett as her life support machine turned off. In issue 300, he said Scarlett as he was reunited with Scarlett for the first time. And we've had a flashback to Vietnam where he has a line of dialogue before his accident. And so here we've got his first sentence that he's spoken since that historical issue, and he's saying, "Scarlett, I want to tell you." And this is the first time we're hearing Snake Eyes speak. And what does Scarlett say? "Not now. Quiet, you chatterbox. Hush your mouth and give Mama some sugar," I think she's saying.
How dare you? No. In that final panel, that is not a passionate sexual embrace. That is a loving, supportive kind of embrace.
That's Scarlett saying, "I've been almost 100 issues without any of that sweet Snake Eyes loving."
Well, I respect that realistically these characters would have a sexual life, and I don't want to deny them that. At the same time, G.I. Joe has always been pretty non-sexual to me. It's more about, fraternal love and paternal and maternal love.
Step brother, step sister.
Maybe this scene sort of splits the difference.
I can't quite read the intent on this one. I'm not too sure.
I think Hama might be playing coy and leaving himself some options. I don't think Hama entirely knows when he writes this page what Snake Eyes might be saying. And I thought he just buried his friend. And so I thought Snake Eyes might be immediately saying something like, "Man, today was really rough," or "The events of the last few weeks have made me realize how important you are. We buried Wade," or sort of the larger thing, which I think you're getting to, is, "I can't believe I'm back."
I was going to say, I can't believe that they cloned me, but missed out certain parts of my anatomy. Sorry.
I don't know that Hama is gonna, like, again, because it's such a big cast, and because Hama writes the emotional stuff with a light touch, and that's like a positive way of saying it. But like a negative way of saying it is, it's like when like Jonathan Hickman writes big emotional stuff in X-Men, Avengers, and Fantastic Four. It's cold. Like his big ideas of time and space and continuity and power sets are really well thought out, but I don't think Jonathan Hickman's like actual emotional stuff, husband, wife, father, son, lovers, I feel like he's not as comfortable writing that. So you could phrase it either way about Hama, but I sort of feel like Scarlett and Snake Eyes are not going to pick up this conversation on the first page of this next issue. I think there's a good chance they don't pick up this conversation in the next issue. And when Hama does come back to it, I bet it's like they're going to be on a mission. And Snake Eyes is going to start to say one small thing that's a thread of what you're getting at or what I'm getting at. Like, you're important to me. I can't believe Wade is gone. I can't believe I'm back. I'm worried about the zombies. I'm worried about Dawn. I'm worried about Sean. Who am I? One of those 8 or 9 things. But I bet Hama is going to sort of get to it by not getting to it. And like, they'll be on a C-130 heading to Springfield. And then like they'll be interrupted by like the red light to jump out of the plane.
Yep.
Or like he'll be training with Dawn and she'll sort of be saying it for him. She'll say, you know, I've had your memories in my head. I wanted to speak to Granny Demon. Is Tommy coming back? And then like this new Snake Eyes will like do some awesome stuff and kind of not say anything. And then like Hawk will walk in and be like, I need the ninjas on a mission. And that is both incredibly frustrating that Hama sort of doesn't dish it out, doesn't like give it to us. And I think also crafty, you know, it's like, oh, I got to buy the next issue to see who this new Snake Eyes is. And again, like I don't think Hama knows.
Yeah, it could be
and
that
I
he
don't
wants
say
to
that
tell us something really big and really secretive at a big bombshell, or it could be something small. It could be something that we just never find out about, never touched on again.
My gut actually tells me that the way that this scene actually plays, like the sort of this is too weighty, but the like emotional truth of this scene that Hama has written, I feel like what Snake Eyes actually wants to say is, Scarlett, I love you. And Scarlett doesn't need him to say it. Mm-hmm. But in Embracing in the final panel, they show it. And he doesn't need to say it because he hasn't been able to speak for all these previous issues. And so he's never said it. They've always shown it. Mm-hmm. So I think what Hama might be saying to us is, even though the new Snake Eyes can talk, he won't.
Yeah.
And
maybe she could even be saying not now. Instead of saying not now, she could say, I know. You know? I want to tell you, I know.
Yes. And either of those, not now or I know, those are both variations of the sort of teasing the audience. You know, it's like the character knows more than the reader. The reader's going to have to take an educated guess.
So you're talking about Dawn there, and I feel like that I've seen the cover to issue 304, so I know that we will see some more of Dawn in the future, and I feel like there were a couple of breadcrumbs being laid ahead of us there by Hama. There's the scene in Springfield where we see her parents, possibly the first time ever,
that was great.
Is there any news of our daughter Dawn? So that's a really interesting dynamic. Her parents are still in Springfield and they're concerned for Dawn. And then later on in the pits, Roadblock says with Mainframe and Duke, and they're talking about the zombies going to Springfield to take over. Roadblock says, we should just sit back and watch them decimate each other. And Duke replies, don't let Dawn hear you say that. Point taken. So we've got 2 instances of Dawn within this story without necessarily sort of showing her. So, yeah, I think laying breadcrumbs for a return of Dawn to Springfield, possibly out of concern for her parents, might be the motivating factor.
Yeah, I think what Hama might be doing is, again, like he makes the stuff up as he goes. So if there is to be a big Cobra versus Cobra or Joe versus Cobra assault on Springfield in 3 issues time or 6 issues time, I don't think Hama knows. I don't think the folks at Skybound have said, you know, like, we want a big event that we can promote around 308 or 310. And there's no, you know, toy or movie to sort of sync up to. So I think Hama is sort of moving some characters around actively so that they can start to overlap or perhaps converge when he's writing the next issue and the next issue and the next issue, and he'll figure it out then. And also, I think Dawn might be out of this issue, not in 302, because she's not important to this issue. She would slightly confuse things. You know, like Hama needs to check in with several plots, and he does check in with all of them. You know, could there be another page or two with Throwdown with Sean? Yes, because his hurt might be just as much as Stalker's and Snake Eyes. Stalker gets to react to this, and Snake Eyes gets to react to this. But I also thought, with Throwdown in costume on the cover, but not a part of the flag folding at the funeral, that he was sitting with the family, that he was part of the bereaved. I sort of wondered if that scene, I don't actually think this is the answer, but I sort of wondered if that scene was Hama writing Throwdown out of this comic. Because now that Snake Eyes is back, and there's already Dawn, who's got a more interesting costume, and you know, she's more different, she's female, she's got some color on her, whereas Throwdown looks just like Snake Eyes. Throwdown has a lot of other similarities. And if Wade Collins exiting this story is some kind of bookend, you know, like this G.I. Joe comic at Skybound is a fresh start, but it's also a continuation. But, you know, some things have ended. Like, I don't think any of the artists who drew the book in the last 10 years are going to show up in the next couple of years and draw the book. That's over. And it might be that Hama feels a little differently. You know, like maybe Hama thought of the zombie thing 5 years ago and thought, well, IDW won't go for that. And now he's like, you know what? Skybound's going to go for that. So Wade has... sometimes a character dies in a story because that character has done all they can do, or they leave the story. They like physically move away and you never see them again because the writer has done all that they can with that character, or what they intended to do with that character. And like, of course, Hama could come up with other things for Wade Collins to do. But I sort of wondered if with this issue, like, is something in Hama's reasoning, Wade has done everything he was meant to do in this comic. And some of that passes on to Sean, or some of that sort of indirectly passes on to Dawn, and also Snake Eyes is back. So Wade can exit. Oh, well then Sean can exit too. So again, I think we'll see Throwdown again, but you can sort of see the argument from a reader or maybe from editorial that there don't need to be 3 Snake Eyeses.
Yeah, I reckon we might see Throwdown to take a little step back before coming back again. But when he does come back, I don't think it will be as another Snake Eyes. I think it will be as a more distinct character that is not Snake Eyes.
Right. And maybe that's a different costume. You know, I mean, I sort of wonder, you know, the sales for Real American Hero for this first issue last month are much higher than the IDW average, the IDW median. And I wonder, but you know, some of that's variant covers, and some of it's a first issue, and some of that it had a lot of hype, and there's this sort of glow effect from the Energon universe. You know, maybe people out there are saying, I'll just get all this G.I. Joe and Transformer stuff and see if I like it. And I wonder sort of actual reading issue 301 and 302, as opposed to actually reading 298 and 299. I'm skipping 300 because that was its own sort of celebration and stunt. I wonder how many more people are reading it right now than were then. And, you know, I don't think Hama's writing it very differently at all. He has said he's not writing it differently at all. But, you know, some things are getting emphasized. Some things might be getting repeated. You know, like if IDW had just kept going, if there'd been a 301 the next month, like, you know, I don't think Snake Eyes was going to come back in 300. I think that was a Hasbro or a Skybound request, or that was Hama maybe changing his mind. And you know, I don't know that. So if IDW had continued and we were reading an IDW 301 and 302, right now or a year ago, I don't know if Wade would have died. The new publisher, the new start, you take a year off, you start to think about things differently, I think.
I spy with my little eye.
I think I've covered most of my I Spies as I've gone along. I had a sort of an I Spy in Error Detected ? In one, which was Mainframe in the pit. He's missing the peak or visor of his helmet, so it's sort of just coming down flat to his forehead. Just thought I'd just note that there. I don't know if it's a mistake or just an art decision. I don't know if you had a thought.
I also noticed it. It very, very, very slightly bugged me. But yeah, it's just one panel, so.
Looks a little bit like, what is it, Springer from Transformers. And my other I Spy that I've not mentioned is that the funeral scene gave us an opportunity to have Gung Ho version 2 Toy appear in the comic in his Marines Blues outfit.
Oh, yeah, but wait, do we see him?
He is stood on that first sort of splash page, Arlington. He is bang in the middle of the Joes that have lined up.
Oh yeah. Okay, so let's try it. All right, so let's try and identify this left to right. Who's doing the 21 gun salute and who's folding the flag?
Here we go. Name the Joes. Is there a clue in the character pose? Maybe the outfit or the funky clothes? Do I spy a pair of pantyhose? Some facial hair or distinctive nose? ID the Joes, knock 'em over like dominoes. Or Larry Hama's polyphonic prose? Name the Joes. Name them.
It's very hard to say. I think left to right is maybe Cover Girl, because I think Scarlett and Lady J are in the other lineup holding the flag.
Yeah.
And she was on that mission. Then we have somebody else who looks like he has a moustache. That must be Stalker, because Roadblock is in the flag lineup. Then we have Snake Eyes with his face covered up. Gung Ho. Then maybe Cutter.
Yeah, and then
who would have a beard?
Cutter and then
Shipwreck.
Cutter and then Shipwreck.
And then I'm not sure who'll be on the right.
All right, so the first three look like Army, and then there's Marine, and then I think there's Army again, and then the one that we just thought was Shipwreck, is that Navy? So then the final one, has some stars on his shoulder in a way that the first three and the fifth one don't.
We've got Army and Navy. Would that mean maybe Air Force?
But they've got a mustache and lighter hair.
Or is that just Shadow?
All right, question mark. Maybe if we interview someone who worked on this issue, we can ask if they can share with us the plot for this page.
Hello, it's Mark from the distant future, bringing you someone that worked on this page. Why, it's creative consultant Diana Davis.
The honor guard is Scarlett, Stalker, Snake Eyes, Gung Ho, Cutter, Shipwreck, and Ace.
So then we get to the is it color guard? That's the name of the person who walks with the flag? Is that also the name of who gets to fold the flag?
I'm just reading a website, What to Expect During Military Funeral Honours, which describes some of the details there. They talk about a uniformed detail, and they go into some detail about the flag presentation protocol and flag folding. After taps is played, the flag is carefully folded into the symbolic tricorn shape. A properly proportioned flag will fold 13 times on the triangles representing the 13 original colonies. The folded flag is emblematic of the tricorn hat worn by the patriots of the American Revolution. When folded, no red or white stripe is to be evident, leaving only blue field with stars. It is then presented as a keepsake to the next of kin.
All right, so someone, then Lady J, then
that might be Hawk, maybe on the left, do you think? Or left or right?
So the person on the far right Isn't that a sergeant? Is it Duke all the way on the right? Because isn't that a sergeant's bars on the shoulder? No, although Roadblock has more of them. Well, let's say this. I'm positive that Hama's plot does specify who all these characters are. And I bet that there are some characters like, Falcon, who are higher in rank that Hama hasn't used in a while, that these aren't. I think these are more likely to be characters that we've seen in the last 5 issues or 50 issues. Barring the fact that everyone showed up in 275, right? Excluding that fact. Would Storm Shadow be in either of these lineups?
Potentially. I mean, he served, didn't he?
Is it maybe him on the far left holding the flag? No, because then on the actual wordless page with the flag folding, that doesn't look like him.
Yeah,
next
I think we're in a hiding to nothing on this one. I think it'll be hard to say for all of those characters.
And then on your flag team, you've got Rock and Roll, Lady J, Torpedo, Tunnel Rat, Flash, Cover Girl, Short Fuse, and Roadblock.
Mark from the future thanks Diana Davis for her service in identifying those characters, and notes that Mark and Tim from the past did a bobbins job at identifying those. I think it was just Roadblock. Cheer, pathetic.
But now there's a new player in town, a comic book writer of some renown. He's using real-world examples and peppering the issues with lots of samples. It's a Larry Hama colloquialism. He's talking G.I. Joe and all its heroism. Can you guess what it is? Is it something new? Now listen as Larry drops a slice of real life on you.
I had a Hama colloquialism. So this is from page 1. It is Serpentor narrating about the zombies. He says, once they were casino guests and Cobra troopers, and now they are truly red of tooth and claw. So red in tooth and claw is a reference to the violent natural world in which predatory animals can cover their teeth and claws with the blood of their prey as they devour them. And this reference came from Alfred Lord Tennyson's very long poem In Memoriam AHH from 1850.
And there's a Wolverine Epic collection published this year, Wolverine Epic Collection Tooth and Claw, which reprints about 10 issues of Wolverine written by Larry Hama, and a couple other comics written by other people. And I don't know specifically if one of Hama's Wolverine issues has a title, Tooth and Claw, or if it's one of the comics in this collection from this era written by someone else. But I think it's a Hama one.
Yo, cola, not grape soda.
It's Joey time.
I can't remember what I gave the last one. I think it might have been 8. I'm really enjoying these. I think the art looks great. I think the story's great. We've not touched on the fact that Hama writes great comedy. I think what he was doing in that first scene with the zombies was like really entertaining and really nicely written. Great turn of phrase. I think I gave the last one an 8. I think I'll give this one an 8 as well. It's great. It sort of really peps along. They cover a lot of ground. They've got these big ranges of high comedy to really grounded funeral scenes and everything in between. Really well done. Looking forward to the next issue.
Considering that this is what I would call a transitional issue, it's a transition issue in that it's not when the bomb goes off. It's not when they attack Springfield. It's not when Wade dies. It's the aftermath of many things and moving some characters into other position, right? Dawn's not even here, but it's definitely somewhere. Cobra Commander gets to Springfield and just gives a speech. Considering that it's sort of the issue where all the plots, A, B, and C, and D and E, none of them actually feel like the A plot. Considering all of that, it is moving and satisfying. The art and color and, oh man, the cover continue to be just wonderful. So I happily give this an 8.
Very good.
Postbox pit, this is where you can send in your thoughts. Mark and Tim will hear it, and then we'll discuss it. It's really nice to hear from our biggest fans.
So before we sign out, let's just have a visit to our letters to the pits. So which of our listeners are writing or not writing into us, but leaving us a voice note? We've got one from Brad from Canada, Pinder, who is a new listener.
Gentlemen, hello. My name is Brad from Canada, and I am a big-time, lifelong G.I. Joe fan. Since I saw the first Sunbow cartoon and picked up the first issue, I really have enjoyed it for a long time. Unfortunately, I had to take a quick, not so quick hiatus from the books. And when I saw that it was returning with issue 301 written by the master, Larry Hama, I had to pick it up. I'm so glad I did, as I started collecting the G.I. Joe classified toys as well. And this issue was amazing, but I need to thank you guys yourselves for helping me catch up on all the G.I. Joe issues I've missed. I was enjoying The Devil's Due for a little while, and I am glad that Sean made his way. And just, again, guys, just really wanted to thank you for having this podcast. I discovered it today, and am going to be a future current listener. So thanks a lot. You guys have yourselves a great day, and yo, Joe, Cobra.
So great to hear from Brad.
Yo, Talking Joe. Hello, Mark, Tim. I gotta say, this morning, first thing I did was pick up my copy of 302, and I really enjoyed it. I liked the little, Dark Knight Returns homage on Cobra Island. That was kind of neat. I also think the funeral scene was very well done. And then Cobra Commander in Springfield addressing the Cobra Island mutant bomb and all the reactions from the patrons. My husband is a televiper. Was amusing. And seeing Snake Eyes talk in the end, I guess Mindbender didn't mute his clone. I believe when we told his origin stories in the past, before Snake Eyes lost his voice, there was some breaking of silence, but it's interesting, I should say, to see him speak now. Also, I wonder how Tim's going to feel that we've already gone back to glossy paper after one issue, and Cobra Commander's helmet changing after one issue. I also love the little Duke preview at the end. I've already seen it in Transformers and Void Rivals, but seeing it in a G.I. Joe comic is pretty cool. Yo, Joe, and now you know. And knowing is half the battle.
Thanks, Scotty. Now, remember, if you want to leave us a voice note for next time, what you can do is head on over to talkingjoe.co.uk, scroll to the bottom of the page, and there is a section there. Leave us a voicemail. Next time on the Talking Joe, we will cover G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero 303 when it comes out on January the 17th. In the distant future, 2024, as Skybound's era of ARAH continues. We will also be covering our look back at the Devil's Due era. We're sort of right in the middle of the America's Elite phase and covering some of the side stories there. We've got a great interview from Mike O'Sullivan and all the rest. And then we'll also be taking a look at Duke, issue number 1, before too very long. At some point in January, I hope, and then also Cobra Commander issue 1 when that comes out as well. So, Tim, where can people find you when you are not talking to me about G.I. Joe comics?
Video essays from my creative partners and I at our YouTube channel, Atomic Abe Productions. My brick and mortar comic book store in Somerville, Massachusetts is Hub Comics. And I write about G.I. Joe at arealamericanbook.com.
Excellent stuff. You can find more about Talking Joe at the usual places. talkingjoe.co.uk is the website that has links to all of those places. You can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. We're also on Patreon at patreon.com/talkingjoe. So a big thanks to all of our backers: Richard, Sam, Jay, Bill, Christopher, Justin, Rob, Brian, and Shane, who are all getting early access to episodes as well as some exclusive content. And that is us done for now. But remember that
Nobody Beats Talking Joe, an international podcast.
Laters.